Wow. Hey, pura vida, mi gente. How you guys doing? How you guys doing? Thanks for tuning in. Uh, I don't know if you guys mind if we finish this book together. Wanted to go ahead and finish reading it, and I wanted to do it with you guys. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of the book we got to finish. Hope you guys have been enjoying the reading so far, and anybody who's been watching all the videos, we pulled out a lot of good information from this book. Right. The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization by Frank Joseph. Whatever you think about the author, I know he's a pretty controversial guy, but this is what I told you about a lot of these ancient civilization Atlantis researchers. They're very extreme with their biases and white supremacy, unfortunately. Yeah. But when it comes to the info, you know, I can verify a lot of it, most of it. And so it's not about really the authors, mostly about the info that he's talking about, which you can verify. This guy has a lot of books regarding, the ancient America, and people think like we're supporting like the author. We're really not. We're just we pull out the babies out of the bathwater, right? We pull out the drop. We get a lot of good drop, and we correlate it with all the other investigation information that we got. So that's what we're doing. We're gonna get ahead and finish up the book, hopefully today. We're gonna go ahead and go to chapter 17. What's up, family? What's up? All right, so I just wanted to say hi. I got my shout out to Big Bro Con Drop 432 the Drop Radio. I got the original shirt he sent me. Where is it? The original shirt he sent me, right? Like 4 years ago. I didn't even ask for it. He just said, "Hey, send me your mailbox. I'm gonna send you something." Boom, I got it. And I wish I can show you the bag. The bag says, "If they can't tell you who you are, how can they tell you who you're not?" Drop Nation, let go. So yeah, 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 yeah. So shout out to the Drop Nation family, the Shabbatah. So Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for again tuning in. Just had that music going in the beginning so we can vibe. I'm gonna have that music playing on the background while I read. We're gonna have a nice little reading session, right? We're gonna finish up the book. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. I see all of you in there. Hope you guys like my shades too. Yeah. Yeah, what's up? All right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hold on, guys. Fine. Oh wow, oh, wow. Let me know if the music ever gets too loud. So again, just in time, princess, just in time. So again, the Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. We're in chapter 17. So I got the physical copy, I plan to scan it and share it on my Patreon eventually. Just trying to get the time to do all that. So each chapter starts with a quote, and they say, "Never utter these words. I do not know this, therefore it is false. One must study to know to understand, or overstand, right? And overstand to judge." That's deep right there. Oh, wow. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. Make sure you guys can hear me good, yeah? Yeah, but, I want a little bit of the music playing too in the background. Yeah. It says on April 27th. Oh, actually, that quote was from the Hindu apothegm of Narada. Ancient Nagas, if you understand, came from ancient America. Guatemala, Guatemala, and his mom is Maya. On April 27, 2001, 6 men and 2 women boarded a small open boat. So this chapter is called an update to the 1992 edition. So this is like extra. We had already finished the book, so this is a whole new. Uh, these are new chapters added. We're gonna read to his new edition. So on April 27, 2001, 6 men and 2 women boarded a pair of small open boats and steered for an area approximately 50 feet from the eastern shore of Fremont Street. During a flyover the previous year, aerial observers noticed 2 peculiar black spots in Rock Lake. At 3,000 feet, they were only dots on the otherwise muddy brown bottom, but suggested possible man-made objects that merited closer inspection. When we reached the suspected area, we began a visual search, and almost at once our 14-year-old deckhand yelled out that he saw a dark shape underwater, not far ahead. In moments we were drifting over a mysterious shadow not far beneath our hull. Video cameraman Stephen Dahl and I quickly struggled into our scuba gear, then threw ourselves over the side. The cold water was a shock to experience, but my shivering skin eventually adjusted to the 50-degree temperatures. Steve was better equipped in a dry suit. My body heat took time to warp up the thin layer of water the wet suit allowed to circulate around me. Subsurface visibility, about 15 feet, was uncommon good for Rock Lake, and we had the luxury of beholding the target in its entirety. It was unquestionably man-made. Listen, its top less than 6 feet beneath the waves. Dark gray slabs had been formed into a stone mound, approximately 6 feet and 9 feet long, from north to south, and 7 feet wide. Everything about it resembled a monumental grave, typical of the Adena culture. All right? These were a Paleolithic people who built numerous stone structures throughout North America's upper Midwest 3,000 years ago. This is what they're literally finding. This was a new edition, 2001. This is what they're finding in 2001. All right? Because we were reading before the previous chapters, it was before that. So that's like they clearly saw it that day. It's not always visible like that, the lake. We read already how bad the visibility is and how scary it is down there because of their own Loch Ness Dracan down there guarding it. Yeah. So the mound was nicely made, not very ruinous. Sorry. Some scholars regard the Adena as the continent's first civilized race. All right, you hear that? Was that at Ohio area? The mound was nicely made, not very ruinous. Its oval configuration complemented its probable function as a tomb, signifying the human soul's rebirth from the cosmic egg. Just like the Serpent Mound in Ohio, a spiritual concept understood by many high cultures around the world before the onset of Christianity. In any case, the structure's location matched its position as determined by our aerial reconnaissance. After recording its precise coordinates and completing our underwater photography, we returned to shore, not entirely convinced that the mound was ancient. Despite all appearances, perhaps it was piling for an old pier from the early 20th century. It seemed too good to be true. So they definitely know it's man-made. They're like, okay, how do we prove it's ancient? That could have been something, that's powerful. But they're definitely like, okay, this is really man-made. We know it's a pyramid. So like, if we could get back to the previous chapters, you guys understand everything, the research that's been done. Back at the motorhome that Steve shared with his wife, Patty, we reviewed his video. Although clearly shot, he had not pulled back far enough for the mound to be seen in its entirety, resulting in images resembling only a disorganized rock pile. Moreover, my borrowed underwater camera had jammed. prevented me from taking any photographs. So we all agreed to return to the site the next morning. By then, winds had picked up dramatically, whipping the surface into white caps. By early afternoon, conditions improved, at least enough for us to put our boats back in the water. And I have a like a sonar image. You guys see that? Kinda. Uh, so they have a little sonar image there, and it says sonar image of the enormous delta structure at the south end of the rock lake shows its uniform side stone mounds appear as spots. All right. So the sonar definitely picks it up. This is courtesy of Archie Eshborn Rock Lake Research Society, and he has a website, rocklakeresearch.com. Guys interested? As we approached the target area, Captain Michael Cushway, who was standing at the helm, called out that we just passed over another dark shape very similar in size to the Fremont Street Mount. Aerial observers had indeed photographed two black spots in this vicinity. Stephen and I splashed over the side again, but were unable to see much. The previous day's water clarity, agitated by the high winds, had badly deteriorated. With directional help from Patty, who kept one eye on the target and the other on our position, we finally found the dark shape. Even in the reduced visibility, we could see that it was identical in virtually all respects to the Fremont Street Mount. This time my camera functioned and Steve pulled back far enough for his video to take in the whole structure. Like the previous day's target, its loose slab stones seemed to make for an unlikely pylon. We returned to the dive boat, then relocated the Fremont Street structure, which we tried to photograph in Rock Lake's typically poor visibility. In the evening, I shared everything we had learned about our finds with Robert Dolphinback, the Department of Natural Resources officer and residents at the lake, responsible for its care and knowledgeable about its history. He doubted that the stone mounds were the remains of an old pier because their separation, about 200 feet in distance from shore, was too great. Moreover, so far as he knew, no harbor facilities of any kind had ever been built in that section of the lake. Lloyd Hornsbustle later pointed out that the mounds, obviously man-laid courses of stone, precluded its modern origin because water levels were not low enough to allow their construction in modern times. The underwater structures, in their opinion, were probably prehistoric man-made monuments, all right? You hear that? Perhaps burial mounds, as we suspected. This is in Rock Lake, Wisconsin. We named the Fremont Street structure in honor of the sharp-eyed son of our captain who made the discovery. Its companion, found the next day, was christened after his younger brother because he was the first person known to swim out to it from shore. So Luke's Mound and Amos Mound are the latest secrets yielded up by that mysterious lake. Others have come to light in the years following the first publication of the Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake in 1992. So that was, the other chapters we were reading. Among the most interesting was the discovery of another underwater effigy mound, this one resembling a serpent or dragon. Its location at the southern end paralleled the same bioglyph described in 1915 by Wisconsin state archaeologist Charles E. Brown near the South Shore. This find was made by a new group of Illinois enthusiasts inspired enough after reading my book to form the Rock Lake Research Society in 1998. Its founder and president, Archie Eshborn, brought determination, professionalism, and the latest high-tech instruments to bear on the quest. Over the next 3 years, he and his serious, talented colleagues devoted their energies and intelligence to unraveling its enigma. Another of their fascinating sonar finds included a small village about 40 feet beneath, listen, a small village about 40 feet beneath the southern middle of the lake on a raised platform surrounded by a standing wall. That was when it was above water. An apparent roadway led off from the site in a northwesterly direction. They even had a road to go to it. You guys hear what's in Rock Lake? Yeah. But several new discoveries were also made during that flight, including the Luke and Amos mounds. As we banked over the southeast quadrant, we were surprised to observe a straight line running out approximately 1,000 feet from the shore underwater before disappearing toward the middle of Rock Lake. From our aerial perspective, it might have been a road or pipeline. Steve's infrared photographs revealed that it ran entirely across the bottom of the lake from east to west. According to the local Chamber of Commerce, no drainage or pipeline construction ever took place near that area of the lake. Lloyd Hornbostel speculated that the mysterious line might be the terminus of a canal described in the early 19th century by Increase Lapham. The noted archaeological surveyor wrote of a ruined stone feature that extended from the northwest side of Aztlan, remember the Mount Archaeological Park in Wisconsin, toward Rock Lake, which he surmised was connected by the waterwork, since plowed over by farmers. During Lloyd's own aerial surveys of the area between the lake and Aztlan in the late 1980s, he detected faint, segmented lines running directly across farmland from the northwestern end of the ceremonial center to the southeastern shore, just where our own flyover spotted a line going out under the water. Lapham's 3 mile long stone canal may have been discovered. Michael Cushway, our captain of the late March expeditions, examined the same area between the lake and Aztlan, but found something very different. He noticed that the ground showed every sign of having been underwater in the not too distant geologic past. Strange, broad, white bands crisscrossed the vicinity, 2 feet beneath the soil. On close inspection, Michael saw that they were formed of many millions of decomposed marine animals, which could only have been deposited there by a body of water. He believed that at one time in prehistory, Rock Lake must have covered the whole area up to Pipestone Hill, only about a quarter of a mile west of Aztlan. The builders of that ancient city may have actually raised its walls very near the former shoreline of the lake, saying the lake used to might have gone even farther out and it was bigger before. Centuries before it retreated to its present configuration, 3 miles away. Perhaps that retreat was the flood, which engulfed a shallower Rock Lake, drowning the stone monuments gradually being discovered by divers. His interpretation is the latest and perhaps most credible of the theories used to explain how the structures arrived at the bottom of the lake. Since 1992, geophysicists have learned from orbital Landsat surveys of Wisconsin that the southern part of the state has been sinking at an incredible foot per century. You guys hear that? The southern part of Wisconsin is sinking. You guys know that? This dramatic fall is generated by isostatic change, in which the land is still on the rebound from the last ice age, is what they're saying, right? 12,000 years ago. As the weight of the retreated glaciers, the size of the Rocky Mountains move north, such a drop would have important consequences for the original Rock Lake, hardly more than a tarn or glacier carved pool sitting at the bottom of a valley. As the land progressively fell, the adjacent body of water, what Michael postulates as Pipestone Lake, emptied itself from the west into the nearby valley, drowning its necropolis of pyramidal mounds until the lake assumed its present dimensions. The abundance of marine deposits separating Pipestone Hill from Rock Lake at a depth of 24 inches beneath present ground level clearly establishes that 3-mile area in between was long ago the bottom of another lake. Laboratory analysis of these deposits may reveal that Pipestone Lake was indeed responsible for the flood that brought the stone sepulchres to the bottom of Rock Lake. That's the end of chapter 17. We're going to go on to chapter 18. Don't worry. And it's called the Aztec Connection. All right, got touched to hijack a little bit with the wording since was it Aztec or Mexica? It's the Mexica that came in a certain period of wave. These are different waves of people from the North America going into Mexico is what I'm trying to say. And there was an early group of Mexica, and then there is also another group later on. There's also other they're referred as to Aztec, but everything becomes generalized and everything becomes Aztec, everything becomes Maya, everything becomes Olmec. So it's like we get generalized history, and people get credited for things they may not have even done. So just touch the hijack on that. But let's see what he's saying. Again, it starts out with a quote. Every chapter starts out with a quote. All right, let me make sure I'm. Hope you guys enjoying the reading. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Let's try to stay on topic as much as we can. I know, but go ahead and chat. No worries. It's just trying to stay on topic. All right. So the quote says, "It was the Mexicans' belief that they had come from the sea, from the region of light, the east, and that their journey's end had finally been at the Atlantic coast, according to Edward Select. So, according to the codices and the legends and the primary sources, what the Spanish said the Indians told them, they came from the north, coming from North America. They had different names for their land, Aztlan, Huehue, Tlapan, shout out to Tlatoni, and many, many different names, man. 7 caves. All right. So, chapter 18 says, Rock Lake, Aztlan is a wonderful place because it challenges the mind, not with a single intriguing question, but with several provocative mysteries that have preoccupied professional and amateur investigators for more than 100 years. The latest inquiry has attempted to confront at least some of these enigmas, but many still evade pat solutions. Where, for example, did the people of Rock Lake, Aztlan come from? Good question. Why did they choose to settle in southern Wisconsin when they did? Why did they leave? Where did they go? What became of them? Through years of accumulating information compiled by numerous researchers, a picture of what actually happened is beginning to take form. It is a picture far more dramatic and fascinating than anything previously assumed or imagined. At least, the immediate origin of the Aztlaners is among the less controversial questions still connected with the site. They came from what is now southwest Illinois. Listen, Little Egypt, just across the Mississippi from St. Louis. Mound City, St. Louis, Mound City, Moundville. Today, visitors pass through the modern museum and climb Monk's Mound, all part of an archaeological zone known as Cahokia, which is literally across the river from St. Louis, which was an ancient mound city. But the public park bears only a faint resemblance to the sprawling metropolis that flourished there 1,000 years ago, when 30,000 people inhabited the greatest ceremonial center north of the Rio Grande. Dozens of pyramidal structures clustered around and beyond a 40-acre plaza at the foot of a gargantuan step mound, 14 acres square, wider at its base than Egypt's Great Pyramid. All right, wider than Egypt's geopolymer, the theme park pyramid over there. Over 100 feet high and made from more than 1,000,000 cubic feet of soil, completely encased in decorated clay. And clay, encased in clay, so it's not all dirt. Oh, so there must be a hard section, they're saying, under that grass. What if it's all stone? Surrounding the city was a 20-foot tall, stockade of plastered lime. You guys hear that? Defended by hundreds of watchtowers, more than 4 miles in circumference, outside of which stood America's version of Stonehenge. Woodhenge. These five precisely arranged circles were composed of identically shaped red painted cedar poles, cedar, oriented to various celestial phenomena, cedars of God, celestial alignments, the stars, right? Cahokia, its real name is unknown, exploded into existence around AD 900, according to them. This is according to their so-called carbon datings. We're supposed to believe that. They always try to make all these sites a lot younger than places in the other parts of the world. Cahokia, sorry, growing swiftly to become the dominant cultural and political power of the Mississippi Valley. For 200 years, the settlement more populous west to the Rocky Mountains for bear claws, south of the Gulf of Mexico for conchos, east of the Atlantic seaboard for dinner plate sized mica flakes, and north to the upper Great Lakes for tons of the highest grade copper in the world. Not just in North America, in the world, the most purest copper in the world. What happened to all the copper that got mined? Bronze Age, they used the American copper for the Bronze Age, so-called Bronze Age. What happened to all the copper that was mined in ancient times out of Michigan? They're telling you right here, they had everything. That was the middle they had. It was surrounded by all these resources. Then, just as abruptly as Cahokia had appeared, it collapsed. Peace, peace, welcome, welcome. Wow. There are some signs of burning having taken place near the northeast corner of the wall, but evidence for major social dislocation is highly equivocal, and archaeologists are not sure whether the fire accompanied evacuation or came after it. They know only that in AD 1100, the pre-Columbian megalopolis, not metrop, megalopolis was abandoned en masse, falling into neglect and ruin immediately thereafter. Huh. The date of its sudden demise is our first clue to the origins of Aztlan, which was founded at the same time. In fact, resemblance to Cahokia is so close that no impartial observer can seriously doubt that the Wisconsin site was created not merely influenced by the same culture bearers from southwestern Illinois, 300 miles away. Even at first glance, Aztlan seems like a scaled down version of Cahokia. The walls were identically constructed with the same kinds of material. It matched the dimensions of its predecessor. Earthworks, too, included a conical dome, ridgetop, square, and step mounds surmounted by high gablet temples of wood and prairie grass. The same crops were grown. Most of the same trade goods were imported, and both sides were located on the banks of major river systems. The tall poles of Woodhenge were astronomical devices repeated in Aztlan, where arrowheads actually manufactured in Cahokia are still being found. Doubtless, they originally belonged to the original Cahokians who arrived at the site that they built up in Aztlan. All right? It's all connected, you see? The people. Judging from the abundant calendrical information regularly computed through Aztlan, we may presume that the group that left Cahokia to resettle in southern Wisconsin's leading sacred center comprised the astronomers who were formerly in charge at Woodhenge. This supposition is dramatically underscored by the chief astronomical orientation prevalent at both ceremonial centers. Aztlan's Pyramid of the Sun and Cahokia's Monk's Mound are aligned to mark sunrise at the winter solstice. Many ceremonial settlements throughout the Mississippi Valley, which sprang into existence after the collapse of Cahokia, share numerous elements in common with each other. But Aztlan alone featured the copious celestial alignments which made it the foremost observatory in pre-Columbian America north of the Rio Grande. Such a unique place could only have been arranged by specialists who carried with them a body of cosmological knowledge and expertise from beyond the Rock River area, and the only conceivable source of native prehistoric astronomy was Cahokia. Of course, Aztlan, even at its peak population, could never have accounted for the total number of people who left Cahokia. The immigrants did not all head north. Some only journeyed to present-day Carbondale, about 80 miles away, where at where at what was later known as the lean site or line site, they duplicated only a fraction of the physical splendor of their former capital. Many more sailed the Ohio River into southern Indiana, where in place of today's Evansville they raised Angel Mounds, a city very much like Aztalan. Others cruised up the Wabash to found similar settlements outside Bicines. Still others went down the Mississippi to create pyramids and ceremonial enclosures in what is now Missouri and Kentucky, such as the Towasagi and Wycliffe Mounds. Garciloso de la Vega, the chronicler who traveled with De Soto's expedition through the South in the 16th century, described an Aztalan like fortress in Georgia's Harlan County near Savannah. Still, other sites of similar or identical descriptions occurred to the east, around Lake Erie, beyond into Virginia and the Carolinas, was even Connecticut, near New London. They represented the scattered population formerly concentrated in Cahokia. You guys see all the connections? We may surmise that each of the walled towns was settled by a particular tribe or leading family from the greater ceremonial center following its collapse. Aztalan was part of this mass migration from Cahokia that spread south, north, and east out of the Mississippi Valley in the early 20th century. Of them all, Aztalan was the most complex and important, if not the most populous. The identification of the inhabitants of Aztalan with the ancient civilizers of Cahokia still does not tell us who they were. However, where did they come from before they suddenly arrived in southern Illinois? All right, Pochi to the Draw Radio. Again, the back of the shirt says, if they can't tell you who you are, how can they tell you who you're not? Think about that. In attempting an answer to this potentially volatile question, we shall begin with the name itself. Standard references contend that Aztalan is a misnomer, that the real name of the fortified settlement on the west bank of the Crawfish River is lost to history. Its ruins were discovered in October of 1835 and were known among pioneers as the Ancient City, a resident Ho-Chunk reference to the site. That's the Indian group around there, the Ho-Chunk, Native Americans, so called. The following January, it was surveyed for the first time by Nathaniel F. Heyer, a well read judge and early settler in the area. Supposedly, he presumed that the ancient city was the legendary home of the Aztecs, who claimed to have arrived in the Valley of Mexico from somewhere in the north. Here, thus erroneously dubbed the place Aztalan, because the legends of the Mexica people and a lot of the people say we came from Aztlan, the north. Aztlan, a white place. That doesn't mean white people. A pure place, a white cap, snow cap mountain place. It could mean many things. Land of whiteness, but doesn't mean of the complexion. Dodge the hijack. So, what they're saying is that wasn't the name of the local people had for that place, is what they're trying to say. But it got dubbed Aztalan, which could make sense. It could still be a part of what they were saying, Aztalan, right? So he dubbed it Aztalan as the Aztecs' ancestral homeland. The name persists to the present day, although archaeologists have long dismissed any conceivable connection between prehistoric Wisconsin and events south of the Rio Grande. Lynn Goldstein's conviction that there is nothing about Aztlan which is similar to Aztec civilization was academic dogma for most of the 20th century. Despite well entrenched scholastic opinion, many disturbing features about Aztlan do indeed point clearly toward Mesoamerica, and far more interestingly reveal a great deal about the Rock Lake story and its people, their fate, and the reason for their occupation of Wisconsin. In publishing these highly controversial concepts for the first time, I am aware that their evidence is not universally acknowledged by everyone who has shared in our Rock Lake researches, let alone most professionals who scoff at the very notion of any parallels between Aztlan and the Mexica world. He says Aztec. I say Mexica. Prehistorians have tended to sharply divide pre Columbian civilization into Andean, Middle American, and North American cultural arenas, discounting any significant physical contact among them. But that's totally false. We know they had contact, they know we had trade, and there's a whole connection, there's a whole history, there's a whole migration legends of many of the nations going back and forth. You know, we've read a lot of them. Ideas may have been gradually and unintentionally transmitted during chance encounters, nothing more. That's what they teach people. But such a rigid compartmentalization of the past has already been dealt some serious blows. It is now known, for example, that the ancient Mexicans, had a system of actual hard currency called the axe monies. You guys hear that? Which originated with Ecuadorian merchantmen. Who's the merchants? Who's the OG merchants, huh? Who spread the same concept to Peru and Chile and Mountville, Ohio. The grave of an important personage was recently opened to reveal a necklace made of parakeet bills, and ceremonial pipes found in Tennessee were crafted of stone from South American quarries. Important material evidence does indeed exist to demonstrate that the Americas were not so isolated and disconnected as most scholars insist, nor did the inhabitants of Aztlan live in a complete vacuum, oblivious to the rest of the outside world. Far from it. We have already seen that their trading networks stretched to the Atlantic seaboard and the Gulf of Mexico. Wisconsin's first clue to some connection with the Valley of Mexico is the very name, Aztlan. Increased Lapham, a skilled early surveyor of ancient earthworks in the upper Midwest, assumed that the site was so described by Judge Higher or Here after he had read Alexander von Humboldt's account of Aztec legends that identified Aztlan as their ancestral homeland. There you go. Where are they getting this from? And where did Alexander Humboldt get that from? He got it from the codices and from the Indian people he met and talked to and their oral traditions. And we're gonna get into again Alexander Humboldt's full book. You know, why not? Might as well, so we can dissect it ourselves. We've read a little bit about of it in real old videos 6, 7 years ago, I think, literally. So you got it from Humboldt, right? Heyer was well versed in von Humboldt's studies, so it is improbable that he would have consistently misspelled so important a name. Moreover, the Aztecs identified Aztlan as a volcanic island in the east, the Sunrise Sea, example, the Atlantic Ocean. It was from here, they said, that their ancestors first arrived in Veracruz on the eastern shore of Mexico. In the many generations since then, they wandered to a place called the Lake of the Seven Caves, or the Womb, Chicomostoc, located in the far north. It was their place of residence just prior to their final resettlement in the Valley of Mexico. Since Heyer knew all this, one presumes he would have more sensibly referred to the Wisconsin enclosure as Chicomostoc instead of misspelling of Aztlan. His own account of the site, the first published description of Aztlan, and released in 1837 edition of the New York Greenwich Eagle leaves no doubt that Aztlan was not invented by the judge, but was, after all, a title used by the resident Ho Shunk, listen, to describe the mound group long before the arrival of European pioneers in the early 19th century. The name is gibberish in any language spoken by Great Lakes tribes and in any Native American tongue north of the Rio Grande. The Ho-Chunk preserved Aztlan in oral tradition. Listen, the Ho-Chunk already had that name. This is what he's saying. This is what they told him. This is what he found out. That's what they're saying, I guess. In oral tradition, they preserved it without understanding its meaning. They didn't know what it meant, though, because are we talking about the modern people being the same as the ancient people? That's a whole other thing. No disrespect intended. People mixed, and a lot of years has gone by. So they preserved that word, which I didn't know. That's new to me. I'm gonna look that up. That's interesting. They didn't know what it mean, other than as an old reference to the walled town. Remarkably, it translates perfectly into the language spoken by the Mexica, he says Aztecs. In Nahuatl, a literal translation of the word is place near water, a syllabic transformative of hostile, water, and a near, lan, place. More usefully translated, it means water town. Remarkably, 10 miles northwest of Aztlan and connected to it by the Crawfish River is modern Watertown. This name too is survivor from pioneer days, when resident Indians were still willing to speak of the ancient foreign chiefs. Listen, the resident Indians were speaking of the ancient foreign chiefs who occupied the area. It is apparent then that Judge here did not merely assign the name Aztalan to the Wisconsin mound group because of some vague suspicion that the site was perhaps legendary homeland. Rather, it was remembered by the local Ho Chunk as a prehistoric reference, undoubtedly used by the vanished builders of the fortified village. The ancient authenticity of the name was reaffirmed by an early respected collector of Native American lore and regional Wisconsin, S.D. Pete, who research revealed that the name Aztalan, listen, was derived from a tradition which was said to be common among the Indians, to the effect that a people who were partially civilized and who possessed tools and implements of all kinds, who cultivated the soil and built houses, had at a previous time come from the northeast and settled in this state, and here built a city, but having become dissatisfied after the lapse of 100 years, burned their city and proceeded south to Mexico, which they conquered and have ever since retained. And again, they have sources for he has footnotes like that's according to the oral traditions of the Indians there, not the Europeans. Hey Tia, we're reading a physical book. All right, I'm on part 5. We've been reading every chapter physically, in this series, and we're finishing it today. All right. The book is the same name you see on the image that I'm on, The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake by Frank Joseph. So while the Aztalaners certainly came from Cahokia in the southwest, their alleged northeasterly origins mentioned here are more probably a partial recollection of the busy copper mining routes that were so extensively traveled from Aztalan to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. They were doubtless the same people who immigrated en masse from Cahokia to Wisconsin and to downstate Indiana's Angel Mounds around AD 1100. So too abundant carbon-dated remains from Aztlan confirm that the site was occupied for 200 years, not merely a single century. Conceptions of time are mostly blurred in oral accounts, and many years ago may refer to incidents millennia in the past or only a few generations back. And that's very true how they got us thinking about time periods and history and chronologies. That's why it's very important, and the effects of them changing the chronology You know, that messed us up. Like that was big, a big hijack that had us locked in a spell too. All right, and we lose the concept of time when we think, oh, that was in ancient BC times, and you know, to somebody 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago might mean the same thing as still in the past, you know, but it isn't. That's the point. It isn't. Different peoples, different eras, people moving. Once you get specific, you start seeing it gets very complex. The history, a significant piece of evidence underscoring Aztlan's verity is an archaeological zone some 300 miles to the southeast on the banks of the Wabash River in Merom, Indiana. Little known to most researchers, it was a fortified town that flourished from the early 12th century. A wall ran almost a mile to enclose at least 45 gypsum covered houses, five dome shaped, square, and ridgetop mounds, together with a trio of freshwater springs. A 30-foot thick wall or ramp made of mixed clay and limestone abutted the south end of the ramparts around AD 1320. The settlement was inexplicably abandoned. If all this sounds remarkably similar to events in southern Wisconsin, the parallel draws surprisingly closer when we learn that the prehistoric Indiana town is called Aztlan. You guys hear that? So it wasn't just one place. Like the faraway Ho Chunk resident Potawatomis and Delawares preserved this name associated with the Wabash site, although they, sorry, did not understand its meaning except that it had been used long ago by the unknown builders and inhabitants. Apparently, Aztalan was their generic term for a river town and was applied to affiliated sites throughout the Mississippi Valley. Oof. It was preserved in the folk traditions of the Plains Indians, who, for good or ill, had dealings with these mysterious culture bearers. An oral tradition has passed the name down to the present day. Even among archaeologists, the early post classic period in ancient Mexico, at the start of the Aztec epoch, around AD 1100, is referred to as the Aztlan complex. If they decry any conceivable connections between Mesoamerica and prehistoric Wisconsin, why have they chosen the name Aztlan to identify the beginning of the Aztec world? As for the real name of what is presently known as Aztalan, which was merely a descriptive term for a river town, listen, or water town, there is more than a little evidence to suggest that it may indeed have been the womb of the Aztecs, the seven caves of Chico Mostoc, through the site's intrinsic relation with Rock Lake. After all, Aztalan's identification as a Nahuatl word is a powerful link with Mesoamerica. All right, just want to remind everybody there is literally a place in Ohio that is called the Seven Caves, and it has been closed down in modern times. But back in the 70s, you can go into it, you know, and walk into it and hike and do all that. Literally called the Seven Caves, and it had seven caves. But what did the Aztec themselves say about their immediate origins in the north? They affirmed that sometime after their arrival from the island of Aztlan, they migrated to a lake in the far north, where they established their first American kingdom. They never referred to themselves as Aztecs, all right? That's what I've been saying. They didn't call themselves Aztecs. That's the hijack. A title coined by their Spanish conquerors because of the natives' professed oceanic origins. They actually comprise seven families known collectively, all right, seven different as the Nahuatlaks, which means something like the old sacred ones from the sea, a plain allusion to Aslan. As a collective tribe, they called themselves the Metzel, or the people of Metzliapan, the Lake of the Moon. The same description assigned to Rock Lake. Oh, remember that in the last readings we were reading about the moon and all that? By the Native American elders who passed on.
who passed this tribal tradition on to Dr. Schurz. There is too a general physical resemblance between Texcoco, located in the Aztec or the Mexican capital, and Rock Lake itself. They are roughly shaped like a figure eight, with the larger body of water to the south connected to the smaller in the north, perhaps because both were artificially created. The Metzel's new home was Chico Mostok, the lake of the seven caves, a metaphor for womb, implying their serpentinary tribal origins. As Morgan wrote, this tradition embodies one significant fact of a kind that could not have been invented, namely that the seven tribes were immediate common origin, the fact being confirmed by their dialects, and a second fact of importance that they came from the north. It shows that they were originally one people, who had fallen into seven and more tribes by the natural process of segmentation. Mexico's leading experts on the Mexica underscores the veracity of northerly beginnings. Perhaps this explains why the traditions dealing with the migrations of so many tribes of Mesoamerica say that these tribes came from Chico Mostok, that is, from the womb, the Aztec symbol for the womb, and hence Chico Mostok was the spiral, the same symbol that appears most commonly on pottery found in Aztlan, where the design was the sacred emblem there and related to the movements of recurrent astronomical phenomena. Chico Mostok, in parentheses, was also related to the Nahuatl word for copper, right? Copper, Tok Chichimec or red woman, considering the vital role that Rock Lake Aztlan played in the ancient copper mining. The name of the Mexica northerly origins take on a mutually validating symbolism. Oh, wow. Surviving Aztec paintings of Chico Mostok depicted as a small lake dotted with tiny islands and bordered by forest, which is just how Rock Lake appeared when Aztlan was flourishing in the 13th century. This is a major drop right here. Remarkably, some of the chiefs portrayed in the Chico Mostok representation are bearded, with decidedly, he's saying non-Native American facial features, whatever he thinks. Because Native, see, this is what I'm saying. There's many different phenotypes, many different nations of the indigenous American people, right? So it's not one look. So whatever he's trying to say, oh, it don't look like the indigenous, he must be referring to the modern ones he might know, right? So until their mixture with Spanish invaders, the native Mexicans were beardless, except interestingly enough for their Emperor Moctezuma III and the adult males of his royal family. Okay, like, does that make sense? Like, you heard what he just said? Oh, they were bearded except the royals, except Moctezuma, he had beard, huh? And his family and all the royals, right? But we've already debunked this. We've shown many depictions of beards and the stone and the rock and the pottery. We know they had beards. They've written in many anthropological books describing the American Indians. So that's the hijack with that. That's a very wrong narrative, right? Because they want us to think of one certain type of look. Ho Chunk Indians told 19th century researchers that the ancient inhabitants of Aztlan abandoned their settlement and migrated south, just as the Mexica claimed their immediate forefathers traveled into the Valley of Mexico from the north. These complementary traditions are reinforced by the founding of the Mexica capital in 1325. So, see, this is what I'm saying. So, they're saying Aztec capital. So, they are talking about the Aztecs. See, the Mexica pre-Aztec, right? They came way before that, 1100s, 1000 ADs, 1100s. 1325 is very recent, guys. This is what I'm saying. The Aztec just got to Mexico, which is precisely the same time period in which Aztlan was evacuated. Alfredo Caso writes that in the creation of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs wanted to establish themselves on another island, also located in the middle of the lake, which would have not only the same physical, but also the same mythical conditions as the place from which they had come. The place they chose was called Texcoco, another Lake of the Moon, another Lake of the Moon, just like Rock Lake. The Aztec foundation story told that a stone cactus stood on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco with the building of Tinoch, Enoch, Tinoch Titlan, land, right? Tinoch, the land of Enoch, the land of Enoch, the kingdom of Enoch, Tinoch Titlan. It was enshrined in a conical temple structure at the precise center of the new capital. Tenochtitlan, in parentheses, means literally place of lawn of stone, tailed cactus, noctli, that's what they're saying. Place of something, right? Tinoch, Enoch. This stone cactus was nothing more than an esoteric metaphor for a solar aligned monolith of the kind discovered on the islets of Rock Lake, an identification made all the more certain when we learned that it was upon this stone cactus that an eagle perched, an event that told the Aztecs to remain in the Valley of Mexico and build their city. Yeah, let's stay on topic. All right. And let's not it's okay to give opinions and stuff and like, but everything is not sure and certain, and anybody can talk without showing sources, and anybody can generalize, and that's why I try to say, guys, we can't generalize. We got to start generalizing. Can't just say, oh, all the people in this place are this. Got to stop that. You're not. That's not what I teach. That's not what I'm showing when we're reading. It's not a generalized history. It's not a generalized thing like a nation or people in one area, like always, like very complex. You got to understand that. The eagle was their symbol of the sun. So it appears so its appearance in relation to the stone cactus, a monolithic sundial, means the Aztec astronomers calculated the correct solar time and place for settlement. In fact, they referred to the Valley of Mexico as the land of the sun, Huitzlampa. We remember the conical mounds of Aztlan's Greenwood group, whose alignment posts cast shadows from the sun to mark significant positions in the solar calendar. At Angel Mounds, Aztlan's sister city in southern Indiana, conical projections atop the large temple mound were associated with the rising sun. The Aztec construction of Tenochtitlan recalls the irrigation feats of the inhabitants of Aztlan, as Lewis H. Morgan wrote, having the sagacity to perceive the advantages of the location they succeeded by means of causeways and dikes, and surrounding their pueblo with an artificial pond of large extent, the level of Lake Texcoco being higher than that than Dan than at present. Those two words right next to each other is hard. It gave them, when the whole work was completed, the most secure position of any tribe in the valley. The mechanical engineering by which they accomplished this result was one of the greatest achievements of the Aztecs, and one without which they would not probably have risen above the level of the surrounding tribes. Independence and prosperity followed, and in time a controlling influence over the valley tribes. Controlling. They had just got there, they're controlling now the whole spot. The ancient engineers of Aztlan similarly employed causeways and, according to Native American tradition, could raise and lower water levels at Rock Lake, possibly going so far as to inundate Tiranena. That was what Rock Lake used to be called, Tiranena, according to the local indigenous people, with a sluice canal from a tributary of the Rock River. We recall their stone aqueduct that some investigators believe may have connected Aztlan with Rock Lake 3 miles away. So too the 15th century Aztec emperor Nasahualcoyot, Hungry Coyote, and there's an actual drawing I have of him, and he does have beard, and he does look very swarthy, constructed a colossal aqueduct nearly 10 miles long to irrigate the territories around Lake Texcoco. Clearly, the construction of massive irrigation projects was shared by both Aztecs and the people of Aztlan. Aztlan's enclosure were coated with white limestone and gypsum plaster. Even domestic building styles were identical. Furthermore, while the Aztecs built pyramids of stone, their Olmec predecessors constructed pyramidal earthworks encased in variously colored clay, the identical technique used by the mound builders throughout the Mississippi Valley, including Cahokia and Aztlan. Some of the more obvious physical comparisons between the Aztlan and Aztec cultures include the temple building, both constructed. Wisconsin's Pyramid of the Sun, a step pyramid, was surmounted by a steeply gabled shrine. Its walls made a wattle and daub with a dried grass roof. The same kind of a shrine adorned the summits of the Aztec step pyramids in Tenochtitlan. Among archaeological digs at the many Mississippian sites, strange, beautifully crafted baton-like ceremonial objects, usually made from semi-precious stone, have been recovered. The Maya equivalent of a major domo in the service of his chief was similarly entrusted with a stone baton as the symbol of his authority. Head elongation, in which the skulls of newborn infants were made to grow in an oblong shape by placing them between pairs of boards, was practiced by both Aztecs and the people of Aztlan. The deformed heads were considered particularly aesthetic and may have been associated with the upper classes. This peculiar attention to the human head and life carried over into cult practices after death. We remember the respectful interment of a headless giant outside the walls of Aztalan. The 79-foot long headless man, earthwork just beyond, and the effigy of a decapitated anthropomorphic figure under Rock Lake. One of the most important Aztec ceremonies took place every April 5th when a man selected for his tall stature and handsome appearance was costumed to impersonate the sun god, Texca, Tezcatlipoca, in a ritual drama that the climaxed with his beheading. As Hulkrans writes, it was in his role as the sun god completing the yearly cycle that Tezcatlipoca or Pocha was this incarnation of a man. In the fifth month, the sun passed through the zenith for the first time since the winter solstice, and then the old Tezcatlipoca died in the form of a captured warrior. In this way, the sun god set out on his New Year cycle, and the rainy season began. The relationship between this Aztec ritual and the headless mounds and burial at Rock Lake, Aztlan is inescapable, particularly the calendrical aspects of Tezcatlipoca's solar ceremony, which reflect ancient Wisconsin's alignments post-oriented to various positions of the sun. Aztlan's skeleton without a skull most likely belonged to the central player in one of these religious dramas. Ritual beheading preceded the Aztec domination of Mexico by many generations. The Codex-style funerary vase from southern Campeche, now at Princeton University in New Jersey, painted in the 8th century by the classic Mayas, depicts a man being decapitated. The figure portrays 7 Hunahpu. He and his twin brother, 1 Hunahpu, were symbolically executed to represent an astral myth wherein the planet Venus appears to die and resurrect itself in its aspect as the evening and the morning star, where we get some of the symbology and attributes of New Testament Jesus. We recall Aztlan's pyramid of Venus with its 10 entombed bodies oriented to the rising of Venus. In other words, the decapitation cult originated in ancient Mesoamerica, whence it was imported into Illinois and Wisconsin by the late classic Maya, who resettled at Cahokia around the turn of the 10th century. Moreover, the severed head appears to have been invariable or associated with heavenly objects, the sun, Huitzlipocha, Venus, Hunahpu, or the moon, Coyolxauhqui, as portrayed by the famous crystal skull. Again, underscoring the complex astronomy shared from Aztlan and Cahokia to Tenochtitlan of the Mexica. They're saying Aztecs, but Tenochtitlan is way older than the so-called Aztecs. And Chichen Itza of the Mayas. The headless man cult undoubtedly preceded Aztlan, Aztec practice, because the Mayas were acquainted with the same bizarre ritual. Dodge the hijack. As Morley wrote, after death the head was severed from the body and cooked in order to remove all flesh. It was then sawed in half from side to side, care being taken to preserve the jaw, nose, eyes, and forehead in one piece. Upon this, as a form, the features of the dead man were filled with a kind of gum. All right, you guys, let me see if you guys can see that. No, you can't see that. Oh, there you go. See the elongated skull? I know it's tiny. Elongated skull that you're showing. You know, we've shown a lot of this. I mean, you can just Google it or YouTube it. You'll see a lot of videos. They've shown this skull. So that was found in Aztlan. The elongated skull they're showing here. They're saying such was their extraordinary skill in this particular work that the finished mark is said to have appeared exactly like the countenance and life. The carefully prepared faces, together with the statues containing the ashes of the dead, were deposited with their idols. Every feast day meats were set before them, so they should lack for nothing in that other world whither they had gone. All right, that almost sounds like just like what they practice in Mexico on the Day of the Dead and stuff, and even in other parts of the world, right? Every okay, thus we are sure not only of the ancient origins of the headless man cult, but that Aztlan's decapitated giant was memorialized in the same kind of pre-Columbian forensic reconstruction achieved in Yucatan before AD 900. Should his head ever be discovered in good condition, we would once more look upon the face of native Aztlan. This explanation for so otherwise inexplicable a burial is a significant link connecting prehistoric Wisconsin with its Mesoamerican origins. Another compelling cultural common denominator linking prehistoric Wisconsin with Mesoamerica was found among the stone monuments at the bottom of Rock Lake. When scuba divers retrieved several deer bones, all leg bones, from various pyramidal structures, investigators theorize they may be the remains of a funeral feast and or sacrifice for the honored dead entombed in the necropolis. Whistles fashioned from the leg bones of deer were used by the ancient Mexicans to accompany religious rituals on behalf of Huitzilipochtli, the legendary Sangar who led the Aztecs ancestors in the Valley of Mexico. And you guys check out my video on Huitzilipochtli and that legend and on what we're determining based on what they're writing about him, and how he was in the Ark of the Covenant and all that they carried. And oh yeah, go ahead, check it out. He was portrayed at their capital, Tenochtitlan, wearing a deer skull on his forehead, just like some Chaldean Druid things in Ireland too. Meanwhile, in the Ohio Valley, several pre-Columbian graves belonging to shamans have yielded crowns of deer antlers made to fit over the forehead, the identical arrangement worn by Huitzilipochtli. Wow. Ak Hulktrans writes, it is noteworthy that deer were extinct in the Valley of Mexico long before the appearance of the Aztecs there. They had disappeared in the early classical period. In other words, the Aztec brought their symbolism with them from some place where the animal was still abundant. Example, from the north. The creature was so ritually important to the Aztecs that they named one of the day signs of their calendar after it, Masalt. Clearly, the deer was venerated by both the inhabitants of Rock Lake and the Aztecs in at least a similar fashion. Yet another indication of the fascinating relationship between these two peoples. When divers found a bone inside one of the sunken structures, one second, guys. Thank you guys. Had to get my dog out. He wanted to get out. When divers found a bone inside one of the sunken structures in 1990, they were excited at the prospect of its human identity, but their enthusiasm turned to disappointment when they were told it belonged to a deer, not to some ancient pyramid dweller. They need not have been so discouraged, however, for all the innumerable dives that had taken place there. Only 5 bones have ever been found in Rock Lake, all of them belonging to deer of great age and recovered from the stone pyramids. Mike Kutska, Narcosis Knights, made a particularly revealing discovery in 1968 when the bone they found was among the cache of broken clamshells, resembling the debris of a feast and deposited inside the wall of one of the structures. It seems difficult to imagine deer straying out onto the lake in winter, dying on the ice cap and sinking only on top of sunken pyramids. No less ludicrous is the notion of boaters munching on venison and tossing the bones into the water, where they fortunately sank onto the stone structures. In any case, all the deer bones are centuries old, although precise dating is not possible. Moreover, all except one, which was too small to break, had been cracked open. The ancient inhabitants of Aztlan were notorious for their love of marrow, which they extracted from the broken bones. Sorry, guys. Numerous identical broken deer bones have in fact been excavated throughout Aztlan. The bone retrieved from Rock Lake by Jason Bullschultz shows several long scratches that could have been made by a blade used to trim off the meat and fat. The deer bones fit perfectly into our interpretation of the lake bottom of the city of the dead, at which funeral feasts common to many cultures around the world were held when the deceased was interred within the stone monument. The bones recovered by divers are probably the remains of those ritual meals. The most popular deity of the Aztecs was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the man god, Man god, man Dracon, who brought enlightenment to Middle America, where he was synonymous with the planet Venus, That's their hijack. They had Hermetics. Representation of him in sacred art show Quetzalcoatl wearing the Ocelocopili, a high conical helmet made of ocelot skin. You guys hear that? A cone helmet made of the jaguar. It's ocelot skin. So too a stone pipe fashioned in the image of man wearing the Ocelocopili, now at the Madison's Historical Museum, was found in Aztlan. Wow, that's deep right there. I'm looking at the image. It was there that the positions of Venus were observed, and the 10 people buried in the Pyramid of Venus were aligned on a northwest southeast axis, an orientation associated throughout Mesoamerica with the rising of Quetzalcoatl's planet. All right, I just want to show you guys this real quick. Oh, hold on. Uh, there we go. Oh, why does this work? Doesn't want to work. Sorry, guys. Hold on. It literally looks like an elf with a cone head. Oh man. Sorry. Oh man. Oh man. There we go. Oh, uh, right there. Move it to the left, to the right, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. My fault. My fault. Forget it, guys. I'll post it. I'll post it on the community wall so you guys can see. Let's see if it works from far away. There we go. You guys see that? You guys see that? Yeah. That's what they found in Aztlan, literally resembling sometimes Quetzalcoatl, but I've seen that on other deities as well in Mexico and the codices and stuff. All right. And they say Persians also had that, Sumerians, all that, right? Go back to the second. So they found that in Aztlan. His Ocelocopili connects the Aztecs with far more than Aztlan. However, in the old world story of Cadmus, listen, there we go with Cadmus again. We've been learning about Cadmus was an Israelite. Well, he coming out of Egypt. Theodorus said that himself, right? So look, in the old world story of Cadmus, the Greek myth with so many startling parallels to Rock Lake. Can't make this up. I told you he was coming out of the true Egypt, America. All these people come out of so-called Egypt, Queen Tefi, all these people come out of mythical, mythic Egypt. It was actually here, the Americas. So all his myth connects and parallels to Rock Lake. The hero was traditionally depicted wearing a Phoenician cap, so-called. This is what they're showing us here. They found an Aztlan Phoenician cap, right? But the Mayas and Quetzalcoatl had it, right? A tall conical helmet worn not only by Phoenicians, but popular with seafarers along the Aegean coast of Asia Minor. So Troy, and identical to the headgear portrayed by Quetzalcoatl. Troy was founded by Darda, a son of Mahol, a son of, I believe, Ethan, Simri, and Judah. Sarah, through the line of Sarah, then Judah. Yeah, Judah. All right, that was chapter 18, guys. I guys, I don't know if you want me to continue. You want me to continue? We got chapter 19. Chapter 19. Yeah. Like a Pope's hat, kinda. Yeah, kinda. So chapter 19 is called Axe Money. About that money bag. And again, they always start with a quote. It says, "A man rose out of the sea, a hero from the waves. His helmet was of copper. Copper the boots on his feet. Copper the gauntlets on his hands. Copper their laces. Copper the belt of his body. Copper the axe in his belt." From the Finnish Munapochka, the boy born in the egg. All right, so that's an old tradition, old thing over there in Europe. But who had all the copper? Where's the purest copper coming from? This is what they're trying to hint at, all right? Axe Money. Chapter 19. We're in the book The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. Does the Ecuadorian Canari, remember the Canari from Ecuador? Not the Canary Islands, but the Canari tribe or nation in Ecuador who were seafarers, right? Are vital to understanding the connection between the Aztlan and the Aztec world. They represent a key to unlock perhaps the final mystery of Rock Lake, its sunken buildings, and the destiny of its people. Let us insert that they key into the turn of the 10th century AD. It was a time of large-scale, inexplicable transformation throughout North America. The Mayas suddenly evacuated all their colossal ceremonial centers across Yucatan, abandoned en masse the rich and complex civilization they had labored to create for more than 1,000 years, and way even older than that. At the same moment, the mound builders entered the Mississippi Valley, raising impressive walled sacred centers and pyramids aligned with celestial phenomena. Simultaneous with this cultural shift to a northern focus, the copper mines of Michigan Upper Peninsula, which had lain dormant for more than 2 millennia, were abruptly reopened and intensively worked. Once again, tons of raw copper were extracted and shipped away. Some of it reached the Mississippian capital, the megalopolis, megalopolis of Cahokia, Illinois, where vast rolled sheets of hammered copper were part of the rich grave goods of a powerful personage discovered during the excavation of a large pyramidal burial mound. The copper went to other ceremonial sites, Spiral in Oklahoma, Etowah in Georgia, Indiana's Angel Mounds, and elsewhere. But their importation accounted for only a fraction of the total amount mined. Where did the bulk of the copper go? Why did the Mississippians mine it in such huge quantities, if not for their own use? The copper miners who preceded them in the second millennia BC apparently shipped their cargoes overseas, listen, to make possible the old world Bronze Age. They used Michigan copper for that, guys. So what do you mean everything started over there? They're using our, they had to have come over. So you mean they only came here just to mine? They came to this beautiful land, this paradise, beautiful place. They're like, hey, why don't we just stay here? Or they just left with the copper, right? That's what they want us to think. No, we went over there with the copper. That's what they don't want you to know. Yeah. So here we go. Again, the copper miners who preceded them in the second millennium BC apparently shipped their cargoes overseas to make possible the Old World Bronze Age. But regular transatlantic contacts or markets did not exist with medieval Europe. These questions seem too mysterious for solutions, or are they? Their answers appear to be found among the Canari of Ecuador. Uh-oh, what he's about to say, getting interesting. And so, again, we're going with their chronologies. How do you know they weren't, Middle Ages, right? Simultaneous with the relocation of the Mayas from Yucatan to the Mississippi Valley and the reopening of Michigan's copper mines, the numerically insignificant Canary rose to sudden influence and affluence as sea traders all along the western coast of Middle and South America. By far their most important contribution to pre-Columbian civilization was the introduction into Mexico and Peru of axe monies, or more properly stated, the concept of axe monies. These were small, non-utilitarian copper axes used as actual currency to purchase goods and accumulate wealth, functioning the same as coins in Western societies. The Kanadi introduced the know-how to work these axe monies. Some were made of bronze in combinations of arsenic and or tin, much the same process developed by Bronze Age Europeans. It seemed the Canary knew the technique of producing arsenical copper or arsenic bronze. All right. For many generations, perhaps from deeply ancient transatlantic contacts, but only after the Maya evacuation of Yucatan did they share their knowledge with others, and Mexican metallurgy did indeed begin with the Canary arrival in Oaxaca around AD 900. All right, you guys hear that? Coming from South America. Is it really from that time period? Remember in my Olmec videos, a lot of the culture and influence that became the Olmecs was coming from South America too. The axe monies rapidly became the basis of Mesoamerican economy, recognized as legitimate tribute and acceptable as ritual offerings as well as a means of exchange. They were even minted after a fashion and standardized into specific sizes 7.7 to 8.9 centimeters, 6.5 to 6.9 centimeters, to 1.2 to 4.5 centimeters. They were mass produced, often in great quantity. More than 13,000 hachuelas, as the Spaniards called them, were found in only one vessel at a Canary grave in Letida, Ecuador. Letida, Ecuador. Hostler writes that finds of hundreds of times thousands are typical in the Centro, Milagro, Quevedo, Manteno culture area, right? In Ecuador. This is where they found all this copper. Listen, where's the Michigan copper go, huh? Well, a lot of it is in Ecuador, who were making it into arsenic bronze, Bronze Age. So, aximonies or axmonies constitute one of the most abundant metal artifact types in Mesoamerica. All right, so guys, let's try to stay on topic. Welcome, welcome. Let's try to stay on topic. We ain't talking about Benjamin Franklin, nothing like that. All right. A spectacular discovery of axe monies was made near Oaxaca, where a terracotta pot contained 23 dozen cloth-bound and neatly stacked hachuelas, a king's ransom, a mass burial of 17 individuals similar to Cahokia's pyramidal grave at Huaca Meno, Baton Grande, included cinnabar, spondylus shells, both elements also found at the Illinois site, lapis lazuli, shades of ancient Egypt. All right, lapis lazuli, which are shades of ancient Egypt. Where? From Illinois, Little Egypt, and 500 kilograms of copper. Copper made tribute collected from Michoacan by the conquistadors and stored at the Casa de Munición in Mexico City amounted to 500 shields and 13 chests of axe monies. Lima's Anthropological Museum has a cast with a volume of 3 cubic meters filled to the brim with copper currency. Where did all the copper of Michigan go, huh? Hey, Penny Lou, thank you. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Appreciate it. But the Canary who trafficked in mineral wealth were even richer. One of their tombs near the important Inca fortress of Ingapirca yielded enough axe monies to equal the annual tribute of a major encamienda. Another Canary gravesite at Gupan contained 3,000 hachuelas or 333 pounds of copper currency. The source for this vast copper supply existed in neither South nor Middle America, but was mined in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. You guys hear that? All investigators agree that the vast majority of copper used by Mesoamerican and Andean civilizations prior to the early 14th century came from the Upper Great Lakes region, right? Isn't that near one of the oldest parts of the world? And when it comes to geology, the oldest forest, the oldest fossils, the oldest water. Come on now, we've done the research and the videos. This is deep right here, right? Where did it all go? It's such a mystery. They just don't want you to understand the connections, the trade, how people traveled and were civilized, creating Bronze Age, all that, metal. Yeah. From Upper Michigan, from the Great Lakes, right? So somebody had to be there first doing it for it to be going out to the world. And for some people in South America to be like, hey, there's actually copper up there. How did that all start? There's a long history before that. Maybe our remains become copper. Yeah. Why not? Our blood, right? Blood almost tastes like copper, right? Or no, it's like iron, right? Iron. Yeah, iron. My fault. Never mind. I'm reading the chat, by the way, if anybody's wondering what he's talking about. So all this copper coming out of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, they're saying from the Upper Great Lakes region, all investigators say the same. The Michigan connection with axe money trade and manufacture was positively established when Bruce Johansen, the historian of Ontonagon, found a strange thin copper axe in one of the old mines that looks almost like a stage weapon, a hachuela of the kind shipped by the Canadi and used in the markets of Mexico and Peru. Now the importance of Cahokia and its own great wealth are explained by the copper its miners extracted and transported to Middle America, where copper was the basis of Mesoamerica's economic existence. All right, copper, so important. The hachuelas came into being at the same time Cahokia set up in Illinois, where it sat at the crossroads of copper production from the north and shipment to the south. When Cahokia was abandoned 2 centuries later, its leaders established themselves anew in Rock Lake, Aztlan, which had been undoubtedly known to them for many generations before as a place of sacred pilgrimage for its ancient necropolis and as a stopover outpost from the Michigan mines. Now it was Aztlan's turn to become rich as the copper trade continued unabated. We recall the long building behind Aztlan's enclosure in which large supplies of raw copper were temporarily stored. But around 1320, the bottom fell out of prehistoric Wisconsin's prosperity when natural copper deposits were discovered in northern Mexico. Mesoamerican societies no longer needed to trade for copper from distant Aztlan. Even Canadi manufacture of axe monies abruptly ceased with the opening of the Mexican mines. Dorothy Hostler has shown that Mexican copper metallurgy began before the 10th century and completed its first phase, about 400 years later, when local binary copper silver alloys, copper arsenic, and copper thin bronzes replaced the silver fleckled copper imported at greater expense from the upper Great Lakes. The second phase, which clearly begins after AD 1300 and continued until the Spanish conquest, occurred at the same moment Aztlan was suddenly evacuated. It doubtless explains why the mining center was abandoned forever. With the discovery of an abundant resident copper source, Michigan supplies were no longer needed. Appropriately, the Upper Peninsula mines were swiftly vacated after the beginning of the 14th century, just as they had been 2,500 years before. Their tools remaining in place to this day, as though the miners might return to their work at any moment. But they never came back, and many modern researchers have speculated that their withdrawal from Rock Lake Aztlan was caused by an extended drought that ravaged America's Middle West. Even Ho Chunk traditions speak of a long, dry period during which the inhabitants of Aztlan deserted their city. The Aztecs, who were identifying with the post Cahokian immigrants to Wisconsin, practiced human sacrifice during periods of drought. All right. That's the hijack, generalizing or what was going. Let's get specific. They may have brought with them from the north, where severe conditions prompted them to such bloody acts of propitiation. So he said, may have. All right. He's guessing right there. Even the Aztec myth and emblem of an eagle, the sun, fighting a snake water, has been interpreted as representation of drought. Hmm, interesting. Underscoring this cultural evidence is the fact that rainfall from America's southwest to the upper Great Lakes region occurs in 550-year cycles of drought, and that the pattern reaches optimum just after AD 1100. This was the same date Aztlan was founded, followed 200 years later by the onset of a 6-year drought and the simultaneous abandonment of the Rock Lake area. All right, again, I'm reminded just of Joseph, in the Bible in Egypt, and the Pharaoh telling him, interpret my dreams. And he's like, hey, you're going to have 7 years of abundance, 7 years of drought. They just said 6 years drought. They're missing a year. The early 14th century is, after all, known as the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age, huh? Are we still in the Little Ice Age? Shout out to Drop Nation, Con Drop, Prester Research, in which temperatures dropped radically from Greenland across the northern hemisphere, ushering in cold, dry air. While a drought may have contributed to their evacuation of southern Wisconsin, it does not seem plausible that difficult weather alone was responsible for the decision of the inhabitants of Aztlan to leave. They had certainly experienced extreme natural conditions before: tornadoes, ruinous hot summers, prairie fires, bad winters, so it seems unlikely that even a prolonged drought would force them to give up their lucrative location as middlemen for the pre Columbian economies of Meso and South America. Discovery of the Mexican copper mines after AD 1300 was more probably the real reason for vacating Aztlan. The Wisconsin clearinghouse was simply no longer required. Its sudden fall, the shift to a second phase in Middle American metallurgy, and the opening of new mines all took place simultaneously. The bad news from Mexico coincided with severe drought, which the Aztlaners interpreted as a clear sign from the gods that their luck had turned against them. So this party's kind of like trying to guess what might have happened, and it's trying to be logical. So. But the real story may not have been quite so simple. Either the economic shift away from Wisconsin and the accompanying bad weather were unquestionably primary and abetting causes, but some internal social dilemma may have also contributed to the abandonment of Aztlan. While very similar in numerous physical details to other Mississippian ceremonial centers, the Wisconsin site is distinct from all the rest because of the cannibalism that took place behind its walls during its final years and because of the manner of its destruction. That's what he's saying right here. Something to look into if you guys want. The outsiders now allowed into the sacred precinct as part of the controlling aristocracy brought with them different religious customs which included ritual consumption of human flesh. These abhorrent practices sparked a schism that divided Aztlan society between new followers of the introduced death cult of the natives and traditional adherents of the old religion from Cahokia, with its emphasis on the recurring movements of the heavenly bodies. Sounds like hijack city or the hijack came into town. They're saying newcomers brought, it's not like the Cahokians. That's what he's saying right here. The social break came to a head with the permanent suspension of all trade from Middle America and the simultaneous drought that settled over the area. Both events were seen or perhaps used by the original culture bearers as curses called down upon them by the gods offended by the sacrilegious cannibalism permitted to flourish within the ceremonial precinct. Aztlan had been built and employed as a sacred center, but such abominable behavior was the worst blasphemy against its holiness. I want to see the primary sources on that. Fire is an archetypical method of purgation recognized by peoples around the world from prehistoric modern times, to modern times, and the walls of Aztlan were certainly burned. The conflagration was total, consuming every square foot within the 21-acre complex, right? So we got that already in the book that it seems to have been burnt down, Aztlan. Even the worst battles, especially in 14th century North America, were rarely, if ever, so complete in their devastation. Rather, the shard evidence of Aztlan's last day argues persuasively that the ceremonial site was deliberately, methodically torched by its own inhabitants. Here, too, Ho-Chunk tribal accounts report that the residents burned their city, then migrated southward. We may assume that the traditional inhabitants of Aztlan gained the upper hand and purified their desecrated sacred center with a consuming fire. Of all the related Mississippian citadels, Aztlan alone ended in so a total blaze. The towering flames rising from its 2 miles of rampart raged through the night, an awe-inspiring holocaust that burned its image indelibly into the tribal memory of the Plains Indians left behind. And that is the end of chapter 19. And would you guys say we go to chapter 20? It's not that long. Yeah? You guys still there? Grab some water. Let's drink some water. Go to the bathroom if you want. Ah, oh, wow. What? Says here, chapter 20, the Lord of Time. He who dwells in the clouds of the old God. He who inhabits the shadows of the land of the dead. The Lord of Fire and of Time. From the Aztec annals of Cuatitlan. I got you, mad. While the purifying intentions of the inhabitants explain the destruction of Aztlan, why did they forsake the entire area and migrate in a body as far south as the Valley of Mexico? Given their proficiency as mariners, the evacuation was most likely carried out in vessels traveling the inland waterways from the Crawfish to the Rock River, down the Mississippi into the Gulf of Mexico. We have already seen that their actions around AD 1320 were prompted by economic necessity and possibly social religious dislocation. Now, a third likely cause must be added to the complex story of a people in crisis. Had the copper trade not failed and the cult schism never occurred, the people of Aztlan would have still vacated their sacred center when they did, although they would not have torched it. Across the Mississippi Valley and throughout the South, all the related settlements were deserted at the same time. Aztlan's sister city on the Ohio River, Indiana's Angel Mounds, saw the departure of its culture bearers in the early 14th century, as did Etowah in Georgia, Spiral Mounds in Oklahoma, and so on. In these other fortified towns, the inhabitants suddenly picked up their belongings and vanished. When the inhabitants of Aztlan set fire to, and then abandoned their ceremonial city, not all of them migrated south into the Valley of Mexico. However, recollections of that mass movement are still preserved in the oral traditions of several Plains Indian tribes. At least one broke away on its own to become a splinter group, settling finally in the Rio Grande Valley of what is now New Mexico, and is where you get your pueblos, your temporary dwellings, migrations that are occurring, guys. Part two of my Hebrew video, go check it out. These were the Tewa, the Pueblo Indians, like I just said, who still venerate a tribal memory of their long trek from Rock Lake. Huh. Yonder in the north there is singing on the lake. There we take our being. Yonder in the north rain stands over the land. Yonder in the north stands forth at twilight the arc of a rainbow. There we have our being. That was in parentheses. Mention of singing on the lake, rain, and the rainbow allude to ceremonies at Rock Lake to dispel the drought, which played so important a role in the fate of Aztlan. Talking about the rain dance, huh? To make it rain, right? The Tewa say their ancestors originated from under Sandy Place Lake in the north. Sandy Beach, in parentheses, has been a local reference to Rock Lake for time out of mind, right? They were talking about Rock Lake. And today specifically defines the south end of the lake. It's called Sandy Beach. That the Tewa envisioned their forefathers emerging out of this body of water is at once reminiscent of the sunken burial monuments and the womb of the lake Chicomostoc, of which the Aztecs claimed was their ancestral place of origin. The Tewa's primal mother or primeval mother goddesses, while dwelling in Sandy Place Lake, were called Blue Corn Woman, near to summer, and White Corn Woman, near to ice. All right, the Corn Mother, which mythically describes Rock Lake's location in southern Wisconsin, just below the hard snowfall line, where summers are mild but winter is closer than in New Mexico. The Tiwa built kivas, ceremonial centers, commemorating their beginning in Sandy Place Lake, and earth navels. And the earth navels, huh? Underground. They made round houses open to the southeast, the same orientation found in the spherical homes of Aztlan and associated with the Mesoamerican veneration of Quetzalcoatl's planet Venus. Quetzalcoatl's planet Venus? Come on. Like, seen in reverse here. These residential dwellings were also part of the Mother Earth navel, recalling the Aztec seven wombs of Lake Chicomostoc. The Tiwa erected sacred buildings that resembled colossal anthills, the same donut-shaped Vision Quest burial mounds found atop Duns County High Cemetery and today encountered by scuba divers in Rock Lake. Clearly, the Tiwa were part of the immigration or migration from Sandy Place or Rock Lake that evolved simultaneously evacuation from other ceremonial centers, involved throughout the Mississippi Valley and beyond. But how much bearing the Little Ice Age, with its prolonged drought, may have had on these evacuations from the Midwest is doubtful. Certainly, the collapse of the copper trade did not affect all the Mississippian citadels. What then was responsible for all the loosely connected ceremonial centers scattered from Wisconsin to Georgia, winding down at the same time? The answer is simple and comprehensively correct: a calendar. One of the major elements in common among the various walled ceremonial centers was their concurrent function as astronomical observatories. To be sure, Cahokia and Illinois and Aztlan and Wisconsin were extraordinary for their abundant celestial alignments, but any of the centers could at least compute major solar positions. And although the ancient astronomers left behind no written records, we may reasonably surmise from the great diversity of their stellar, lunar, and solar orientations that above all they worshiped time. They didn't worship time, those were marks. They may have felt oppressed by it, or perhaps they strove to live in harmony with its cycles. In either case, their obvious intention to the movements of the heavens clearly defines an obsession with the regular passage of cycles in nature. Here, too, the mound builders compare closely with Tenochtitlan's own priest kings, the Tlatoan, all right, priest kings, Tenochtitlan, the Tlatoan, who were likewise self precious of time, which they envisioned as the figure of a ferocious sun god. In fact, the chief deity of the Aztecs, the solar Huitzli was jointly known as the eagle with arrows of fire, the lord of time. The people of Aztlan lived their ceremonial enclosure, as did the inhabitants of the rest of the walled settlements throughout the Mississippi Valley, because their sacred calendar ordered them to do so. Separated by great distances as they were, their alignments, posts, or sundial pyramids all told their observers the same thing at the same moment. It was time to go. Interestingly, the duration of fluorescence at Cahokia and the occupation of Aztlan each lasted precisely 2 centuries. Together, they comprise equal halves of what was defined in the Mesoamerican calendar as the long count. This is deep right here, what they're talking about. They're telling you where the long count, where they were the people before they 200 years here, 200 years here. They're measuring the times, yo. They say the precision of the equinoxes, right? So, pretty cool. A period of 400 solar years after which worlds, so that's the long count, or epochs, came to an end and from which new ones emerged. The sacred calendar strictly regulated the social and even the personal behavior of people in Middle America from known Olmec beginnings, although certainly much earlier, like I've been saying, because it appears in their culture already fully developed. It's already there. It's just a culture, group of people they're calling so-called Olmec, which they didn't call themselves that. In the 14th century BC, through Maya and Toltec times into the Aztec age. Their lives were absolutely dominated by several intermittent calendrical cycles, and failure to act in synchronization with their rigidly prescribed dictates could bring ruin to the state or even catastrophe to the whole natural world. The Tonalpolcawali was a ritual calendar from which the horoscopes of each person were plotted by astrologers or tonalonamalt. The Tonalpuke were yet other priests who determined good and evil days. Merchants, sailors, traders, and travelers of all kinds could not begin their journeys until the Tonahuke had determined the proper one, serpent or lucky day. Wars were waged, sacrifices offered, business contracted, marriages made. In truth, social behavior of every kind took place according to the precise instructions of the ritual calendars, as interpreted by ecclesiastic star gazers, right? Ecclesiastic. Operated by every Mesoamerican state, these calendrical systems, for all their astronomical sophistication, were deeply prehistoric, as have been suggested, predating even the oldest recognized Middle American civilizations, as Alfonso Caso writes. This calendar's development is without doubt very old, and it must have been the creation of a people who attained a high degree of culture prior to that of all the peoples with whose cultures we are now familiar. At Tikal in Guatemala, site of one of the very earliest ceremonial cities of the Mayas, colossal pyramids are bunched together, one abutting the next, too many and too close for any conceivable use. They were constructed one after the other only because the sacred calendar ordered the builders to commence work, and the same calendar was in use in Aztlan. Dr. James Church demonstrated that the Pyramid of the Sun at Aztlan formed a calculated alignment between the top of Pipestone Hill in the west with Christmas Hill in the east to compute sunrise each November 14th, which is also last day or end of the agricultural year in the Maya calendar. November 14 was also the Aztec New Year's Day. Dr. Schurz was able to show that the North Star figured in prominently among the calculations used by the ancient architects of Aztlan. They needed it to achieve the precision layouts of major earthworks, so it undoubtedly received special recognition in the practice of their sacred geometry. The North Star was similarly honored among the Mayas as Shaman Ek, who was also venerated as the patron of picture writing, perhaps a reference to the written computations that preceded the construction of the earthworks. according to his unwavering position of the heavens. Shaman Ek was portrayed in Mayan hieroglyphic script as bearded. All right, here you go, bearded. Say they weren't bearded, bearded. Always a provocative feature indicative of foreign origin. So just because people had beards and these stones and these depictions and these codices, it has to be foreign, right? That's silly. Think about that, guys. Like this is what they teach us in school. This is what they tell kids in school. Oh, they must be foreign. There was no people with beards here. They must have sold them somewhere else. They brought the beards over here. Dodged the hijack big time. The inhabitants of Aztlan and all the other related, although widely separated, fortified towns evacuated in common because the sacred calendar they universally recognized ordered them to leave at the same time. The calendars ordered them. And the way he's explaining is kind of weird, but I get what he's trying to say. They were in certain places specifically for certain periods because they knew they had to keep it on the move, maybe because of changes, in weather or whatever. So in parentheses it says the immediate cause for the abandonment of Spiral, writes Phillips and Brown, it is an historic event that is beyond archaeological reclamation. The same statement may be applied just as appropriately to the dozen or so other ceremonial centers, including Rock Lake Aztlan, that were vacated around the year 1320. But if the sacred calendar told the people of Aztlan when to leave, it also told their predecessors when to go to Wisconsin. The Mesoamerican origin of the calendar presumes their Middle American origin as well. So, from the vantage point of millennia, we begin to see the mass migration of whole cultures and populations from south to north and back again as part of the calendrical concept of synchronizing human activity with the movements of the heavens, as above, so below. Again, as above, so below. Is a very old esoteric maxim describing the operation of astrology. In fact, many plain Indian tribes, such as the Sioux, still regard the South as the beginning and end of all things, where they began and must return. All right, and I'm going to correct Mr. Frank Joseph on the origins of the Sioux. The Sioux actually originated in Ohio. All right, Ohio, not the plains. Many Siouan tribes ended up in the plains, just like many Siouan tribes ended up in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and other places in the South, Illinois, Louisiana, like the Mobile, right? Eastern Siouans. So that's the hijack. Siouan doesn't mean plains. That's your own hijacks if that's what you think as well. Ohio, that's where they came out of. Ohio. The absolute origins of the Rock Lake Aztlan inhabitants are lost in the mythic traditions of Aztlan and with the volcanic island's inescapable resemblance to Plato's Atlantis. But their discernible beginnings start with the Mayas of Yucatan, whose presence at Cahokia and other Mississippian sites cannot be ignored. True, the pyramids throughout Middle America were built of stone, while those in the north are temple mounds of earth. But stone was not available in sufficiently large quantities, and the Mississippians had to work with the materials available to them. Aside from such explicable differences, the Maya impact on North America above the Rio Grande is unmistakable. Right? We got the Creek migration legends. They told us where they came from. Around AD 900, the same sacred calendar that had been running the lives of prehistoric Americans for generations ordered them to go north. They resettled in a new city, Cahokia, near the banks of the Mississippi River. 200 years later, the solar long count reached its midpoint, a highly significant position in that the time had arrived for them to move north once again and resettle in a new home near Rock Lake's venerated city of the dead. In 2 more centuries, the long count ended and another began, signifying a demand from the sacred calendar to start the grand cycle all over again in its place of origin in the south. Judge Heyer was right back in 1837 when he concluded that the ancient Wisconsinites of Aztlan became the Aztecs or Mexica people. Perhaps he was privy to more information than he divulged, or he may have relied heavily on Native American accounts he was privileged to hear from the whole chunk still residing in the Lake Mills area. In any case, the Maya and Cahokia predecessors of the ancient people of Rock Lake Aztlan are certain. The removal of the people of Aztlan around AD 1320 is a more complex story, but its various elements are no less traceable. They monopolized the mining trade to Middle America, where copper was the basis of the Mesoamerican economy. When local Mexican deposits were discovered, long distance trade collapsed and Aztlan became commercially superfluous, coincidental with the end of their status as prosperous miners. The people of Aztlan were internally torn by religious controversy and externally beset by a prolonged drought. They probably did not need to be told by their astronomer priests reading from the sacred calendar that the moment had come for them to depart. They may have interpreted the providential calendrical demand in the light of their concomitant misfortunes as the will of heaven, and willingly deserted Aztlan to seek their destiny in the southland of their ancestors. And so the mass abandonment took place according to the cycles of time they had recognized and lived by for unguessed generations. And that was literally the last chapter, guys. And now it says here a summary, right? And it's literally like 2 pages, right? We're gonna read it, right? And the summary, he says, the title is called 5,000 Years and 1,000 Words. All right. For the dismount. At a time when Idra's first pharaoh sat on the falcon throne, when the Near East represented the only known civilized territories on Earth, fleets of European seafarers from islands in the Atlantic braved the ocean towards North America, dodged the hijack. European seafarers, they always got to say they came from here. This is what I'm saying with these Atlantis researchers like Frank Joseph and all the rest. They want to always put the people outside somewhere else, not locally. They sailed through what is now the St. Lawrence Seaway, more accessible 5,000 years ago than it is today. Cruising further westward into the Great Lakes, they made for the Upper Peninsula, the world's greatest source of high grade copper and the object of their long voyage. How they knew it abounded, there is a question lost to prehistory. So this is what I was saying earlier. So these people just somehow knew they came from Europe, somehow knew there was mad copper here, and they just came for the copper and left this beautiful place with all these people living here advanced, right? They just left. Dodged the hijack. Seeing in reverse, he's trying to explain how he's like, he knows they got to Europe, so he's thinking, oh, they came here, they mined it, and they left. Dodged the hijack. Because he says right now at the end, that is a question lost to why? How did they know it was here? Why did they leave? The visitors disembarked at Iso Royale and along the Kewanu Peninsula, setting up fair weather mining camps and sinking pit mines into the hard, rocky ground. They excavated tons of the mineral, loading the holds, hard, rocky ground. Sorry, loading the holds of their ships with raw copper, then traveled the inland waterway south to the clearinghouse just below the hard snow line in southern Wisconsin, at the small lake named after one of their leading families, Tirahana. Here, the stored copper was processed into ingots, while the miners waited out the winter until late spring or even summer when the mines were reopened. Imposing structures, stone sundials, oriented mounds, alignment posts, etc., were built to provide them with accurate calendrical information for the planting and harvesting of crops. That's why a lot of the alignments are for, you know, sailing schedules, mining timetables, and more. Science combined with religion, as the most honored dead were entombed beneath the astronomical monuments, which also served as the shrines for a mystery cult. The lakeshore became a sprawling cemetery, a necropolis or city of the dead, where settlements throughout the immediate vicinity. The copper ingots were loaded aboard ships that navigated the Rock River to Mississippi, into the Gulf of Mexico, and back across to the sea, the Atlantic homeland. Its oceanic capital achieved tremendous prosperity as the major supplier of copper to Bronze Age societies throughout Europe and the Near East for 1800 years. Again, for 1800 years, America, the true old world. We're talking about resources. We provided the Bronze Age to the world. Come on now, but they never settled here, right? They just went back, right? And there was no connection, right? No people trying. That's why these stories don't make sense the way these guys explain these things, right? The fact is, copper from Michigan created the old world Bronze Age all over the world. That's the fact. And there are conjectures and stuff saying people came here and all that, and the Indians couldn't have done it, and that's all lies, guys. It's so logical to think correctly. Instead, just thinking logically, well, obviously, it takes time for people to discover that. They have to be local people. Oh, look, this copper. Oh, look, all that, man. And we know that's the oldest land coming out of the primordial waters, not too far from there. Come on now. Where was I? Where was I? So 1800 years they provided the copper to the old world, right? Michigan. Meanwhile, the Wisconsin's Tirahana continued to function as a strategically located mining town, and its fame spread for the important ceremonial center it had become. But in the 12th century BC, the Michigan mines were shut down, and Tirahana's residents prepared to leave. Relations with the native Paleo-Indian population had not been consistently amicable. So, to protect the necropolis from desecration, a canal was opened from the river running due north of Tirahana, inundating most of the sacred precinct under 60 feet of water. As the disenfranchised miners fled southward, some were massacred by ancestors of the Atiwa Denton and Chippewas. All right, so again, they're trying to say these weren't indigenous people to America. I mean, they could have been coming from, yeah, like the South Cahokia, right? They could have been coming South America, Peru. Doesn't necessarily always mean they came across, the Atlantic Ocean. This is all conjecture on this part, when they add these parts. At least few attempted transatlantic voyages to Europe. Others went further south, sparkling or at least impacting Mesoamerican civilizations, establishing their all pervasive religion based on the cycles of time and eventually intermarrying with the natives. So they're trying to say, oh, we civilized them. Because he's literally trying to say, oh, my ancestors from Europe, my Atlantis white ancestors came, civilized, and then we brought it to Mexico and civilized it. Literally, he's not literally saying, but that's literally what he thinks because we've shown his other books what he'd be saying about the white race and white Atlanteans, the most civilized, his people, just like what's his name, Sefer, just like Sefer be saying on his videos, Mr. White supremacist. Yeah. Sorry, got off subject there. So around 8900, their descendants, the Ecuadorian Kanadi, introduced hard currency in the form of copper, axe monies to Middle and South American societies and reopened the mines of their forefathers in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A new mining center was established in southwest Illinois, known today as Cahokia. It flourished near the Mississippi River as a great commercial enterprise, dispatching its miners north in summer and shipping tons of precious copper south to fuel the economies of Mesoamerica and the Andes. 200 years later, Cahokia's astronomer priest, interpreting the sacred calendar, ordered the city abandoned, as residents scattered by tribes throughout the Mississippi Valley and the South, raising similar Cahokia like settlements. One of the larger contingents migrated north to the sacred lake, remembered as Tiranena, and built an observatory known 3 miles to the east, Aztlan. Tiranena's shores were again used for burials, while the few ruinous stone structures still standing above the surface of the water on little islands were once more venerated as shrines and holy places. Mining operations in Michigan were perpetuated, while the people of Aztlan oversaw the storage and processing of the copper into oxide ingots before their shipment down the Rock and Mississippi rivers to Middle and South America. But in the first quarter of the 14th century, Native American copper deposits were discovered. The Great Lakes sources were no longer needed. Its mines were once more shut down, and Aztlan lost its economic reason for being. Coincidental with the copper uh, crisis, sustained drought afflicted southern Wisconsin, while a religious schism generated social chaos within the ceremonial center. Moreover, the sacred calendar informed its residents that they had completed a 400-year cycle known as the Long Count, and that the moment had come for them to leave. Convinced that their misfortunes were the result of the cannibalistic death cult they allowed to flourish behind its high walls, the inhabitants incinerated Aztlan in a ritualized conflagration to purge the desecrated sacred center. They migrated south into the Valley of Mexico, where in AD 1325 they built the city of Tenochtitlan. Again, that's much older, and 1325 is very recent, and that's when the Aztecs got there. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They built the city of Tenochtitlan, that's the hijack, from which they developed and ruled the Aztec Empire until the Spanish conquest 200 years later. In the 1830s, the first modern European settlers in southern Wisconsin erected mills and dams that raised. They didn't get there till 1830s. You guys hear that? Europeans, and they that raised Tirana's water levels between 7 and 20 feet, submerging whatever ancient monument may still have stood above the surface. All right? So you guys hear that? They built dams and they flooded it even more. So if any pyramidal monument was actually showing, it got buried. Just like they buried many indigenous towns, many so called black towns, many archaeological sites under man made lakes all over North America. Even in South and Central America, guys. Even in Costa Rica, we have one of those. So, they raised this dam, and the Tirana's water levels raised between 7 and 20 feet, submerging whatever ancient monuments may still have stood above the surface, henceforward known as Rock Lake. The structures survived only in legend until 1900, when they were seen during another drought. In 1937, Max Snow, inventor of the scuba, found a cone-shaped structure in the south end of the lake. 30 years later, a diving instructor, John Kennedy, discovered a large tent-shaped pyramid toward the center. During the 1980s, Dr. James Church calculated the astronomical significance of Aztlan, and in the last years of the decade, the first side-scan sonar search of Rock Lake revealed effigy mounds and several other man-made features on the bottom. In 1991, the first indistinguishable photographs of an underwater monument were made, prompting action to have Rock Lake declared a historical site by the state of Wisconsin. More than 10 years later, that official protection of Lake and its sunken city of the dead is still withheld, right? And even more years later, because this is older now, this book, they don't care to make it a historical site, right? So that's the end of the book, guys. Congratulations, you guys read a whole book. If you watched all the episodes, you read a whole book. All right. We read the book The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. And I thought, my review, my opinion of it, I thought that besides the hijacks of Frank Joseph and all these researchers, you know, he's saying Aztecs built Tenochtitlan. That's totally, come on. They got their 1300s. Tenochtitlan is way older, so he's kind of like conjecturing and just generalizing a little bit. But in general, a lot of the things you can pull out a lot of drop on this book. All right, a lot of good drop in this book. I enjoyed reading it with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Are you guys still there? Hello, hello. Wow, you guys still there? Yeah. All right. So, thanks for tuning in and allowing me to finish reading this book and reading with me. Appreciate you guys for doing that. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed it. The whole book. It's really good. I thought it was really good. If you want to have it, you know, I got more books coming that are hard to get in PDF form, and I have them on my Amazon wish list. I have a book list there that I'm trying to get. All right. The lanterns there. Yeah. No worries. Thank you. Thanks to all you guys that were here from the beginning today in the live chat. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I'm gonna give you your Saturday back. All right. Hold on. Let me just read the chat a little bit here. Wow, wow, wow. Let's put up the music a little bit. Wow, wow. Yeah, you're very welcome. Stay tuned. We got a lot more coming. Stay tuned. We got a lot more coming for real, for real. I'm gonna go catch this little fight. I'm gonna go see what's up with Canelo. If you guys, yeah, I like boxing. My son's into boxing, so I got into it. Oh, actually, I forgot to tell you. I'm a little tired. I sparred with him today before the live. I was gonna go live earlier. He said, "You wanna go spar?" I'm like, oh, I was about to go live. No worries, I'll go spar with you. And it's not easy. He's not a baby. He's 16. He's been training almost for like a year and a half now, so he's gotten a lot better. It's hard to hit him. He gets me good sometimes, and I get tired. I'm not in shape like him. He's always training and stuff. It does take a lot of cardio for boxing. So, yeah, he kind of got me a good time. I got him. I think he's definitely doing good. I think he's definitely doing good. He's getting a lot better. I think he can handle himself now, even with older people. So I'm kind of confident because I measured him. I'm trying to measure him. I'm also trying to measure my injury, my clavicle bone injury. I'm doing a lot better, so it didn't bother me while I was sparring with him. So all good. I'm gonna go check out this fight. I got the cards before, and I'm talking about Canelo and this the Puerto Rican Berlanga. I know people. I don't like watching entertain. That's Babylon. Hey, I like it. I'm entertained. I got to do something different, right? And sports started in ancient America. So what's up? Timing and footwork. There you go. Yeah, I'm from Boston, man. It's Boston. Park your car right there. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you guys like the book, the reading. All right. Appreciate you guys always. Much love to everybody that tuned in. I see you guys in the live chat. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to anybody donated. Penny Lou, thank you. Appreciate you. All right. We're going to go out now. Thanks for, again, tuning in, guys. Give it your Saturday back. Shabbat Shalom. Give thanks. Give thanks for this moment. Wow. Breathe. Just breathe. Wow.